we are very happy to be discussing the topic of Sri Guru Tattva. And the purpose of today's session is not so much to give anything new, but sometimes there's a necessity for us to go back to the foundation. There's a necessity for us to revisit the basics. And there's a necessity for us to have a big picture view of our involvement in Krishna consciousness, because oftentimes as practitioners, one of our tendencies would be to get involved in the nuts and bolts, or I would say getting involved in the details to such an extent that we may sometimes lose perspective of the big picture. And that is a common circumstance that devotees would find themselves in. It is not very unusual, because the practice of Krishna consciousness, devotional service, is a multiple year, multiple decade affair. We would need to engage in Krishna consciousness for 30, 40 years, depending on how many years we have already, we have been involved and what our age is and so on. So in the long haul of 30 to 40 years, the chances of us getting involved in details to such an extent that we would forget the purpose, and sometimes we would also lose the big picture, is oftentimes seen. So it's important for us to revisit the foundation and to understand how mercy flows, and to understand the concept of Guru in the context of Krishna consciousness, as seen in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Parampara. And then for us to basically develop a perspective or renew our perspectives so that we could move forward decisively with greater strength. So I guess the purpose is not so much to introduce a topic afresh, but it is more to revisit the topic with the purpose of giving a big picture view, because oftentimes that is missed when we have many, many years of practice. So this is relevant for those who have been around for a long time. This is relevant for those who have just begun their journey in Krishna consciousness. As far as I'm concerned, I see this as an opportunity for me to reflect a little deeper in terms of what was received and how it should be conserved and how it should be passed on in certain ways. So it's an opportunity for purification for myself as a speaker as well. So it's a wonderful opportunity. So I do thank the organizers of the Birmingham Sangha for giving me the opportunity. So we'll get started. It is often said that there are 3 books in ISKCON. I would say ISKCON because we are all ISKCON. So in 3 books in ISKCON, which are foundational, are the Bhagavad-Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The Bhagavad-Gita, in one sense, is the key because it is spoken by Krishna, but it is the key that would allow us to position ourselves appropriately so that we could have a view of Srimad Bhagavatam, we could have a view of the Chaitanya Charitamrita as intended by Krishna himself, because Krishna speaks the Bhagavad-Gita. So he is basically giving out his, what I would call as instructions in the Bhagavad-Gita. So we ingest those instructions, we take those instructions, and then we approach him, because Srimad Bhagavatam is non-different from Krishna. So we take instructions from Krishna via the medium of the Bhagavad-Gita, and then we approach him in Srimad Bhagavatam because Srimad Bhagavatam is non-different. And then once we start living the experience of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is fundamentally experiencing the chanting of Harinam. Srimad Bhagavatam is all about being able to chant Harinam. Experiencing Srimad Bhagavatam is equal to chanting Harinam, because it is actually, in one sense, it is the Srimad Bhagavatam composition by Srila Vyasadeva is practically given for those who are chanting Harinam. So it is actually very, very close to the heart of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas as we make progress. So in one sense, Srimad Bhagavatam is living the chanting of Harinam with deep faith. So we move from receiving instructions from Krishna, and then we go on to the Srimad Bhagavatam. And when we start living Srimad Bhagavatam, we can then understand the mood of Chaitanya Charitamrita, because Chaitanya Charitamrita is postgraduate study, because it involves emotions and experiences of devotees who are very advanced and who are living the precept of Srimad Bhagavatam to the fullest extent. So if we talk about the concept of prema, which is the objective of Krishna consciousness, the goal of Krishna consciousness is Krishna prema, falling in love with Krishna. And falling in love with Krishna requires us to receive instructions on sambandha, which is what is the relationship we have with Krishna. You cannot fall in love with someone without knowing who they are. You cannot fall in love without knowing who we are. So there is a necessity to establish the relationship. And then once the relationship is established, which is all about prema, prema is all about establishing the relationship, then the process of bhakti begins. And bhakti is all about service, because abhideya is service, bhakti is abhideya. You cannot perform bhakti without the concept of prema. You cannot serve unless there is deep love. Yeah. Because it is love which allows one to surrender, and without surrender, one can't serve. So it's a sequential affair. It's a sequence of events that have to take place. So given that particular sequence, one cannot understand the sentiments of devotees and the emotions of devotees in the Chaitanya Charitamrita unless one has understood Srimad Bhagavatam, because they are living Srimad Bhagavatam. They have absorbed the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam into their hearts. And one cannot understand Srimad Bhagavatam without actually approaching Srimad Bhagavatam through the key and the medium of the Bhagavad-Gita. So one needs to start with the Bhagavad-Gita. So we will do that today, is that we would take one verse from the Bhagavad-Gita, and then we would go on to talking about Guru Tattva, which is the topic of the day. So we'll start with prayers, and then we will do the verse from the Bhagavad-Gita. Om Ajnana Timrandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhye Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So the verse that we're going to do is 15th chapter, 15th verse, 15:15. Srila Prabhupada has quoted this verse to the extent, it's to a very large extent. If you hear his lectures, you would often see him quoting this verse. And this verse is very instructive. So we're going to start with this verse. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto mattah smritir jnanam apohanam cha vedaischa sarvare vedyo vedanta krit veda vedya chaham. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. So what is very important in this particular verse is the fact that Krishna is making a statement that he is seated in everyone's heart, and from him come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So he's practically saying that he's going to facilitate knowledge, he's going to facilitate remembrance, and he's going to facilitate forgetfulness as well, because it is from him that all these origins come. So this is very important for us to understand, that it is Krishna who is going to help us remember him. It is Krishna who is going to help us with knowledge, the sambandha that is required. We need sambandha to understand him. I mentioned the word sambandha. Sambandha is relationship. How are we going to be coming in touch with the Lord? How are we to know who we are? How are we to know who He is and the relationship between us? This is facilitated by Krishna. That is why Krishna says, I'm going to help you remember. I'm going to give you knowledge. Chit is knowledge, where one understands who they are. They understand Krishna. They understand the connection between themselves and Krishna. So this particular knowledge of what is service requires understanding who we are and understanding Krishna and establishing that bridge. And Krishna says He's going to help us remember. But what is frightening and alarming is that He says He's also going to help us forget. He is also going to help us forget, because He's saying, I will also help you forget. From me come remembrance, and from me come knowledge, and from me come forgetfulness. He is going to help us forget, because if Krishna chooses to help us forget, there is nothing that anybody can do to stop that. If Krishna chooses to give us knowledge in terms of the sambandha between us and Krishna, which is all about bhakti, bhakti requires knowledge of who we are, because one cannot fall in love and surrender without the ability to understand their position and the relationship with Krishna. So prema is the objective. Prema is the objective, and that prema is being facilitated through sambandha, so that there can be abhideya, which is service. Yeah. Then what is the goal of life? The goal of life is prayojana tattva, which is essentially to be able to be fully cognizant of the relationship and to be able to render service with that full cognizance and to increase the level of prema, because prema is limitless. It's absolute, because Krishna is absolute. Loving Him also is absolute, because it has no boundaries. So in that sense, what we are trying to say is that Krishna has to facilitate. But then the question is, how does He facilitate? What is the methodology used by Krishna to facilitate? This is very important for us to understand. We need to understand, how is Krishna, what is the process used by Krishna to help us remember? What is the process where we fail and then Krishna helps us forget? So we need to understand the intricacies of the process, so that this way we would be able to position ourselves in such a way that we never forget Him, because this is the teaching of Srila Rupa Goswami Pad. He says one can never forget Krishna. One should never forget Krishna, and one should always remember Krishna. This is the objective of all the practices that we do in the process of bhakti. We do not want to forget Him. And forgetting Him essentially means forgetting the sambandha that we have with Him, forgetting that He has sambandha with others, the other devotees, forgetting our connection with them is through Krishna. Forgetting essentially has so many different compartments, but it is all going to lead to poor service. It is all going to lead to us not being able to move forward. So even though we are pure theoretically, in the sense that theoretically the jiva is pure, nama is pure, but then why is it that we are not able to experience rati, which is the attraction and the attachment to nama? Why is it that some of us struggle to hold on to the bead bag? Why is it that it is a daily chore? Why is it that we feel as if we have been burdened? And this is true regardless of how many years of chanting has been done, regardless of whether you have chanted for 10 years or 15 years, you've been chanting for a year. There are times when devotees feel that this is being done as a matter of imposition, not so much a matter of being inspired to chant. So what is it that is going wrong? Why is it that Krishna is facilitating this forgetfulness that comes to such an extent that we forget that we are even calling upon Him? We forget the fact that He is non-different from His nama. He is non-different from His deity form. He is non-different from nama. He is basically the same. So why is it that we forget those little intricacies and we actually do our japa in a manner which is quite burdensome? And such complicated, burdensome chanting doesn't last very long, because then it becomes problematic to continue the process if it is uninspired. So why did we lose inspiration? Because the fact that we are chanting today is because we received inspiration. So how did Krishna inspire us? How did Krishna help us remember Him? This is to be understood. Krishna has two ways to help us remember Him. This is Shastric. One of the ways is that Krishna can attract us and will attract us through His nama. The holy names are all attractive. They can attract us. This is one way for Krishna to capture us, is through Nama. So we hear the Nama, we become inspired, and then we want to chant. This is how Sambandha can be established, because Krishna can literally attract us through his name. He's non-different from his name. The other way for Krishna to attract us is through the medium of his devotees. So that's why there is a pillar, 3 foundational pillars of Krishna consciousness is Sadhu, Shastra, and Guru. Now, when we use the word Sadhu, Krishna is practically attracting us through the medium of Sadhu. Now, how is this attraction established? Krishna resides in the heart of the Sadhu. Krishna's Sambandha resides in the heart of the Sadhu. And then, when we hear the sound vibration from the Sadhu, the sound vibration enters into our heart and establishes itself and gives us faith. Now let's go back and see how this has worked out. Mahaprabhu, who appeared 5 centuries back approximately, is Krishna himself. But he comes in the mood of Srimati Radharani. Srimati Radharani is the embodiment and the representation of the absolute limit of love that can be expressed towards Krishna. She is the absolute limit, which means she is the maximum limit that one can even think of or conceive of. If there is a possibility of thinking about infinite numbers, then her love is infinite. It is limitless. It is absolute in scale towards Krishna. Now, when Mahaprabhu comes on the planet, this is Krishna coming in the mood of Srimati Radharani, carrying that boundless, absolute, limitless love towards Krishna. This is Mahaprabhu. So he is carrying this love. He is already infused and carrying the maximum limit of prema. If you can set a maximum limit, which is in itself a concept which can't be done because it's limitless, Krishna doesn't have a limit, neither does the love which Radharani has towards Krishna, then Mahaprabhu has that love in his heart. He is carrying that prema and he has come into the planet. When he spoke to his disciples, when he spoke to the Goswamis of Vrindavan, the sound vibrations of Mahaprabhu carried Sambandha, and that Sambandha was passed on into the hearts of the devotees. The Sambandha was passed on to the hearts of the devotees. That is the specific Sambandha that was passed on. When he spoke to Srila Rupa Goswami Pad on the banks of the Prayag, and he was instructing him, the Sambandha from the heart of Mahaprabhu, which is the prema from the heart of Mahaprabhu, through sound vibrations, entered into the heart and entered into the ears of Srila Rupa Goswami Pad. Entered into the heart and the ears of Srila Rupa Goswami Pad. The same happened with Srila Haridas Thakur. The same happened with Lord Nityananda, who is non-different from Lord Chaitanya, but in the mood of servitude, he took the prema of Lord Chaitanya with a bid to distribute it. Lord Nityananda's madness, Divya Mada, which is the transcendental madness exhibited by Lord Nityananda, is due to the fact that he is carrying the limitless, boundless love of Mahaprabhu on top of his head, and he's distributing it. He can't control himself because that is the nature, an extraordinary nature of that love. Yeah. So, very important for us to understand that this particular circumstance of Mahaprabhu speaking to his disciples, Mahaprabhu speaking to the Goswamis, Mahaprabhu speaking to the different followers, practically transferred bhakti from the heart of Mahaprabhu to these personalities. They are representing the beginning of the parampara. And them being the beginning of the parampara, it has been passed on from one particular disciple to another. And what has been passed on? The sound vibration of prema and faith from the heart of Mahaprabhu is being passed on from one particular level to the next, and it is being received into our hearts. When we hear the sound vibration of a sadhu, Krishna uses the sadhu to attract us. This attraction is possible simply because this attraction is being facilitated, simply because this attraction has everything to do with Mahaprabhu being able to give prema. It has everything to do with Mahaprabhu being able to give prema through that particular devotee. It is everything to do with Mahaprabhu basically being able to give prema through the devotee. This is very important for us to understand, that what we are receiving through the Guru Parampara has come to us from Mahaprabhu himself, and the sound vibrations carry the faith and the experience and the prema and the sambandha has gone from one heart to another, and it is being passed on by disciplic succession, and we are receiving it. Now we need to understand that bhakti is independent. Bhakti Devi is not controlled by Krishna. Bhakti Devi resides in the heart of the devotee. And when the devotee is served, Bhakti Devi leaves the heart of the devotee, not essentially leaving him, but goes from one heart to another, depending on the recipient and the mood of service. So then she reaches the heart of the person who is serving, the servant. So this is the parampara. The parampara system follows the position of pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya, which is 4.34 in the Bhagavad-Gita, where someone has already received Krishna Sambandha, someone is carrying faith, they're carrying experiences, they're carrying that specific connection with the Lord, and then when they speak, that particular vibration has the ability to attract us. This is how Siksha and Diksha relationships with the Guru are established. It is Krishna. It is Krishna using that particular person to reach out to a prospective jiva. And this reaching out of Krishna occurs through the medium of bhakti and the medium of service. There is an exchange of bhakti and service. So there is service which is done by the recipient, and then the giver practically transfers and appreciates the service and the humility and the mood. Bhakti Devi goes from the heart of the Guru onto the heart of the disciple. This is how it is transferred, but it is from Krishna himself. This is from Mahaprabhu. It has been transferred over ages. This is basically the parampara system and disciplic succession. When we say that we are inspired by someone, that inspiration is Krishna attracting us to the path of bhakti. That inspiration in our heart is Krishna attracting us. He is using a sadhu to capture our attention and attracting us to his service. And then we get inspired by that particular sadhu. One could have many Siksha connections. One could have many Siksha gurus. Amongst the many Siksha gurus, and these are all personalities who are attracting, these are all personalities who carry bhakti, and this bhakti is entering into our hearts when we hear the sound vibration, and they have the ability to capture and inspire us. And once we are captured, once we are inspired, amongst one of those sadhus who is inspiring us, one of the Shiksha gurus, one of them becomes a Diksha connection, which is we get initiated by one of them. So our parampara does not distinguish Siksha and Diksha. We do not distinguish. Our parampara, if you notice, for example, our Srila Prabhupada has Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that is a Diksha connection. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur has Gaura Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, that is a Diksha connection. Gaura Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj has a Siksha connection to Bhakti Vinod Thakur. Yeah, now a Siksha parampara is there, there's a Siksha connection, but they are still connected in the same lineage. Bhakti Vinod Thakur has a Siksha connection to Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, right? So on and so forth. So there are Siksha and there are Diksha connections. So for example, you have both aspects here. For example, here in Vrindavan, you have Shri Shri Radha Shyam Sundar and you have Shri Shri Radha Damodar. Shri Shri Radha Damodar are the deities who are worshipped by Srila Jiva Goswami Pad. And Srila Jiva Goswami Pad was the Shiksha Guru of Shyamananda Prabhu. And Shyamananda Prabhu was the Diksha disciple of Hridaya Chaitanya Prabhu. So the point I'm trying to make is that in our parampara, even going back to the Goswamis, there were handovers of disciples who were Diksha disciples if they were inspired by a Siksha connection. So the instructions to Shyamananda Prabhu were given by Jiva Goswami Pad, but then he was sent to Jiva Goswami Pad by his Diksha Guru, Hridaya Chaitanya Prabhu, yeah, who himself was a disciple of Gauridas Pandit. So there is a connection between Diksha and Siksha, and there is cooperation between the two levels, but there is no difference in our parampara in terms of Siksha and Diksha connections. It is a serious relationship. It is not a casual relationship, because that devotee has been used by the Lord to inspire and drag the soul, the jiva, out of slumber and to awaken the jiva and to inspire them into service. Krishna Sambandha has been given by Krishna using the jiva. So this is not an ordinary occurrence. It should not be treated as an ordinary occurrence. It is not. The role of the Siksha and the Diksha Gurus are slightly different. The Siksha Guru facilitates the daily practice of sadhana, facilitates the taking of the jiva and ensuring help for the jiva along the way as they become more steady practitioners, so that they could experience the specific flavor of Sambandha, the specific flavor of bhakti as enunciated, as given in the Shastra. The Diksha Guru is the connection to the spiritual sky. So both are required. In some cases, there is a Diksha-Siksha connection, it is the same person. But in general, our parampara encourages Siksha and Diksha, both. And they don't differentiate. They do not differentiate because in both cases, there's inspiration and there's a need for facilitation. And it is seen through examples throughout, going back to Mahaprabhu himself. So we need to understand that we have already been inspired if we are chanting. We are chanting Harinam, so there is inspiration. Someone has inspired us and we are chanting. So if there is inspiration, then why? Which means Krishna. If there is inspiration, which means Krishna basically has helped us remember. If there's inspiration, Krishna has helped us remember. Go back to 15:15 of the Bhagavad-Gita. He says, I'm going to help you remember because I'm seated in everyone's heart. The super soul who is Krishna's expansion, who is the localized expansion of Krishna in our heart, the super soul is observing our activity. As he finds that our mood is becoming a little bit more favorable for bhakti, he practically puts us in touch with one of his devotees who has the ability to inspire us. And then he attracts us. And then the inspiration goes on. The inspiration is corresponding, and it is basically equivalent, or I would say, it is basically proportionate to the level of surrender, humility, and service rendered by the disciple. Inspirations have to be maintained. Inspirations have to be maintained. If we don't maintain the inspiration by appropriate effort, then we lose inspiration. And if we lose inspiration, this is simply Krishna helping us forget him. This is simply Krishna helping us forget him. Please understand that now we need to understand that we have been given inspiration by the Siksha and the Diksha Gurus. But why can't we hold on to it? Why is it that it's such a struggle for us to hold on to the inspiration, that there are some days that are good, some days that are bad, which is all fine, but then sometimes we find that the whole process of devotional service is an imposition. There are devotees who are unhappy, which is an interesting phenomenon. There are other complications in their life that I'm not giving, I'm not basically minimizing struggles. I'm merely saying that if you're in touch with the Samam Bonam, if you're in touch with the absolute scale of happiness, if you're in touch with Sat, Chit, Ananda, then where is this question of sorrow whilst practicing Krishna consciousness on a consistent way, in a consistent manner? Where does this come from? What is it that we are in touch with? So there is this particular phase of being inspired, and then we do something, or we may be doing some things, which practically de-inspires and pushes us out, and then we lose momentum. So Krishna is playing a role in both ways, because he is giving us something which we are not qualified for. Nobody is ever qualified for receiving what Mahaprabhu has been distributing for the last 500 years. Nobody is qualified. Everybody is receiving a gift. This is an extraordinary gift. This is an extraordinary gift. This is an extraordinary gift. So nobody is qualified and everybody is being given this extraordinary gift by the mercy of Mahaprabhu and the mood of Lord Nityananda, where he's just distributing without any check on whether someone is qualified, not qualified. No, nothing is being seen. It's being distributed. Nobody is qualified. So something has been given which is super precious. We have been inspired to hold on to it because we went through the particular inspiration. And then now we are also going through a circumstance of, at times, not being inspired, sometimes even going to the extent of leaving the association of devotees. We could have wonderful reasons. We could have all kinds of logical reasons for leaving the association of devotees, but understand that ultimately it is 15-15. Krishna is helping us facilitate a forgetfulness. Ultimately, it comes to 15-15. We have to go back to Shastra. Ultimately, it's 15-15. So we have to be very careful in understanding that we have received a gift and holding on to it and holding on to the inspiration requires work, real work. And there are things that you just can't do once you're inspired. You cannot do this. There are things that you really can't do. There are multiple examples of those who have been inspired but who couldn't continue. Yeah. One of the most important things is for us to understand through Srimad Bhagavatam. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. We'll give an example or two from the Chaitanya Charitamrita to highlight the issue. But before we do that, we have to understand the position of the Guru, position of sadhus. How does Krishna perceive sadhus in our movement? How does he perceive Vaishnavas? Please understand that the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu talks about 64 opulences of the Lord. Yeah, he has 64 distinct opulences, but on an absolute scale. It is on an absolute scale. It is not relative. It is absolute. There's no limit. So these are 64 opulences of Krishna to an unlimited absolute scale. What is interesting is the jivas possess 50 qualities, but to a small extent. Lord Shiva has 5 qualities more to a very large extent. Yeah. He is not a jiva, he is not Vishnu, he is somewhere in between, so he is almost Vishnu. So he has an extraordinary level of the 55 qualities. But Lord Narayan, who is the more opulent representation of Krishna, has 60 qualities in full and to an absolute level. But Krishna claims that he has 4 qualities which are superior. This is the claim of our acharyas. This is in Shastra. When I use the word claim, I'm using it in the context of merely choosing a word. I'm not questioning the claim at all. I'm merely making a statement. Krishna says he is opulent in 4 additional ways. What are those 4 additional ways? He says, and this is the truth. This is the truth. Because it is in the Bhagavatam, it is in the Charitamrita, it has been written by Srila Rupa Goswami. Everything written by our acharyas has come from Srimad Bhagavatam. Everything. Srila Jiva Goswami Pad wrote the Sandarbhas. There are other commentaries written in Sanskrit by the other Goswamis. All of these were captured in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So the Chaitanya Charitamrita is an easy to read version of the very complicated representation of Tattva given by the Goswamis of Vrindavan. Chaitanya Charitamrita is written by Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. He was associating with the Goswamis when he wrote and authored Chaitanya Charitamrita right here in Vrindavan. So he practically took from the Goswamis, but then this is a representation that is easy to understand for practitioners because it's been written in simplistic language so that there is very little room for interpretation. Yeah. So Krishna has 64 opulences in full, absolute limit. And what are the extra 4 opulences? Krishna has Rupa Madhurya. The beauty of Krishna is unparalleled. It is unparalleled. And this Rupa Madhurya is such that it actually is superior to Lord Narayan. What is the specific form of Krishna? The threefold bending form of Krishna as Shyam Sundar. He is bent in 3 different places. Tribhanga. That Tribhanga Rupa of Krishna is Rupa Madhurya because it is unparalleled and there is no equal to it, and it is the extraordinary limit of beauty, absolute limit, which means there isn't a limit there. Rupa Madhurya. Then Krishna has Leela Madhurya, the extraordinary pastimes of Krishna, starting from his childhood pastimes with Mother Yashoda in Gokul. All of these fall in the category of Leela Madhurya. His pastimes are extraordinarily sweet to such an extent that they overwhelm the opulent pastimes of every other incarnation. Yeah. So Krishna has this very specific Leela Madhurya, which is unparalleled, which is not seen by anybody else. No other incarnation can actually display this particular opulence of Leela Madhurya as displayed by Krishna in Vraja Bhumi. So there is Rupa Madhurya, there is Leela Madhurya, and then there is Venu Madhurya. Venu Madhurya is that you will not find any other incarnation playing the flute. Krishna playing the flute is an extraordinary opulence which distinguishes him from Lord Narayan on an absolute scale because there is nobody else who plays the flute. What is the function of Krishna's flute? The function of Krishna's flute is to attract jivas. He plays the flute to attract jivas to him. He is attracting his servants by playing several notes. Yeah? He is passing on messages. So this particular activity of Krishna in Vraja of Venu Madhurya, Venu is flute, is extraordinary. And then you have the most important, Prema Madhurya. Krishna has the sweetness and the opulence of Prema, which essentially means that he is surrounded by devotees who are so extraordinary that Krishna practically considers that his opulence and his extraordinary opulence even over the Lord of Vaikuntha. The Lord of Vaikuntha, now Lord Narayan, has servants. He is very opulent, unimaginable. But Krishna is surrounded by devotees who are so extraordinary that Prema Madhurya, the devotees who love Krishna, are so extraordinary that that is considered one of the opulences of the Lord. So now you can just understand how much is a devotee and a Vaishnav to Krishna. He considers his devotees as his distinguishing feature. He considers his devotees, the Vaishnavas, as his opulence. That is the position given to Vaishnavas by Krishna. So to simply think that he is using someone to attract us would practically be a minimal statement. Krishna thinks of the Vaishnavas as his opulence. He practically distinguishes himself from Lord Narayan by exhibiting these extraordinary devotees who surround him and who love him with such extraordinary ways that he just basically feels that that is his opulence. That is basically how it is distinguished from Lord Narayan. Now you can imagine what he thinks of his devotees. He considers the devotees themselves as to be his opulence. He distinguishes himself from others' incarnations. He distinguishes himself from the Aishwarya Rupa of Lord Narayan. Krishna is special because he's surrounded by special souls. This is his position. This is his position as far as devotional service is concerned, as Vaishnavas are concerned. Now we also need to understand that in such a circumstance of Krishna inspiring us through one of his Vaishnavas, one of the devotees, Bhakti Devi is completely independent and is resident in the heart of the devotee. When the devotee is served, when the sadhu is served, then Bhakti Devi goes from the heart of the sadhu into the heart of the servant. This is called kripa. This is mercy. When we use the word mercy, when we use the word that we have received kripa, inspiration is kripa. Inspiration to chant Harinam is kripa. If we have received kripa, it is because Bhakti Devi from the heart of the sadhu has come into our heart. This is kripa. It's been transferred. Yeah? Because of service. This is the connection. It is all basically based on that. This facilitation of transfer is done by Krishna as a super soul. He brings us in touch with someone who can inspire us. And that inspiration comes because we serve, and then we are given that inspiration from the heart of the practitioner, the sadhu. When we say sadhu, we want to distinguish the sadhu. This Vaishnav sadhu is one who is completely dependent on Krishna and Harinam. He is completely dependent on the process of Harinam, he or she. And as a consequence, they carry Harinam in their hearts. They carry Krishna and Nama Rupa in their hearts. Guna Rupa Leela, all of these are fully manifest in the heart. The heart has become Vrindavan. And from there, Bhakti Devi, who is reciting, goes into the heart of the servant. Inspiration begins for the servant to start chanting. Then there is this whole process of being able to be inspired with Sambandha. And without that Sambandha, one cannot serve. There is no Abhideya without Sambandha. How can you serve if you do not know who we are? How can we serve if we do not know the desires of the master? How can we serve efficiently if we are in amnesia? We have forgotten who we are. So this whole process of sadhana bhakti is to restore the memory to such an extent that we are able to remember quite distinctly who we are. We are able to understand the desires of Krishna, so we can serve him appropriately and make ourselves available with the mood of surrender, so that we could really give ourselves in such a way that he can use us in his service. This inspiration comes from the sadhus. How do we see this in practice? We see this in practice when we start the day. How do we begin the day? We begin the day with the Samsara Dava prayers, the Guru Ashtakam prayers, written by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Yeah? What is it which is the purpose of the Guru Ashtakam prayers? The Guru Ashtakam prayers practically positions the Guru as a servant of the divine couple. This is to remind the disciples, to remind us that this person who is inspiring us, be it a Siksha or a Diksha connection, is a servant of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna. That is Guru Ashtakam. Early in the morning, we are reminded that this Guru of ours is a servant of Krishna. The Siksha Guru, Diksha Guru, it is the same, is a servant of Krishna. The Sadhu is a servant of Krishna. Yeah. So that we do not think of them as an ordinary human being. They may exhibit the characteristics of ordinary human beings. They may fall ill. They may exhibit certain other characteristics, and we may start thinking that they are ordinary human beings. Worse, we may start thinking that they are dependent on us. This is the dangerous position. Srila Prabhupada used to say that there are two very dangerous jobs in the world. One is to be my servant, and the other is to be a servant of Shri Shri Radha Madhav. Both are very dangerous jobs, because the Guru Ashtakam prayers is reminding us that the Guru is an eternal servant of the divine couple. We want to be able to view our Guru in that manner. We want to be able to view those devotees who are inspiring us in that manner. So this way, we can be careful, because bhakti has been received from their hearts. And bhakti will leave our hearts if we find out, if they find out, if Bhakti Devi recognizes, because she is in the heart, if she recognizes that our mood is not proper. So Guru Ashtakam is how we start our day. Then we do an arati, which is the Guru Vandana prayers. Yeah. We do the arati, which is the Guru Vandana prayers. The arati, which is the Guru Vandana prayers, is also for the purpose of focusing on the mercy of the Guru. To understand the position of the Guru and our dependence on the Guru for us being able to move forward. That dependence is being displayed in that Guru Vandana prayers that we do at 7 o'clock, the Prabhupada Arti seen in our temples. So we are reminded that inspiration has come, and we need to hold on to the inspiration. But then what is it that takes it away? How does Krishna help us forget? Krishna helps us forget. Krishna is helping us forget categorically when we commit offenses. When we commit offenses, he helps us forget. There is the position of not so much a matter of how proficient we are in our practice. This is mercy. One could become bewildered in any environment by very insignificant aspects of material energy. Very insignificant aspects of material energy can capture even extraordinarily accomplished practitioners. Everybody knows, or most of you know, the story of Saubhari Muni, he was such a powerful yogi that he was practicing beneath water so that he wouldn't be disturbed. He used to stay underwater for years and years and years so that he wouldn't be disturbed by the external world and he could execute his sadhana. He was very powerful. But then, one day, he developed attachment to the fish around him. You see, wherever you are, material energy is so powerful. If there is even the smallest quantity of rajas, then it attaches itself to the environment. And he developed attachment to the fish. So a very large fish, which was considered to be the king of fishes in that pond, was taken away by Garuda. Shri Garuda is an expansion of Krishna, but he is in the rupa of a bird. Because he is in the rupa of a bird, he will act with that conditioning in terms of the body. But he is an expansion of Krishna because he is an expansion of Lord Ananta in terms of serving Krishna. This can be read along in different scriptures. Yeah, you can read about it in Sri Narayana Kavach in the 6th canto, where Lord Garuda, even though he is seen as a bird carrier of Krishna, of Vishnu, he is compared to the most confidential portions of the Samaveda that practically connect the devotee to the Lord. Just as Krishna is taken from one place to another by Garuda, Garuda has the ability to bring Krishna into our heart based on the bhakti. So he is compared to the most confidential portions of the Samaveda in scriptures. So Saubhari Muni, because of his extraordinary position of being a yogi, he practically insulted and prevented, committed offenses against Garuda, the carrier of Vishnu. And because he committed the offense against Garuda, he practically put some kind of a spell, a curse that Garuda shouldn't be visiting those waters. This is what allowed Kaliya to come there. You see, because Garuda can't come, and the snakes basically are afraid of Garuda. So Kaliya came there because of that. The point being that as he sat there because of this offense, he actually developed an attachment, or rather an awakening of desire to have union with the opposite gender by seeing the copulation of fishes. I mean, this is so insignificant. This is just fascinating to see that one is a yogi. He's very powerful. He's so powerful that he can be underwater and he's practicing his sadhana, which means that he has immense capacity for austerity. He has immense capacity for powers, etc. But then he gets bewildered by fish of all things underwater. Then the bewilderment grows and he wants to start a family. And then he goes and approaches a king for the hand of his daughter. But then he is extraordinarily old and he looks quite, austere in his appearance. So the king refuses. Then Saubhari Muni uses his mystic power and comes back as a very wonderful looking, youthful person. He doesn't marry one, he marries 50 daughters. This goes from someone who is staying underwater, practicing yoga, to marrying 50 women. Okay, you can imagine, I'm not saying is anything wrong to get married, but I'm just merely saying that this is a diametrically opposite condition where now he has to engage in the complexity of the world because he's now married. He has to engage in the complexity of the world and his sadhana has gone out of the window. It's over. This is because of an offense. So there was inspiration first, and then there was forgetfulness that comes of his original position, and he starts desiring material energy. This is an example. The other example that is seen is Indra, Lord Indra of the heavens, offending his spiritual master, Brihaspati. He is engaging in sense gratification and he doesn't see the surroundings where he is completely absorbed. His spiritual master, Brihaspati, walks into the assembly and Indra ignores him and he is cursed to lose everything. He loses everything. Practically everything is lost. This is an example of losing positions because of being filled with false pride and committing offenses to the Guru. This is an example. Yeah, the Narayana Kavach prayers in the 6th canto, they were basically given to Indra so that he could regain the offenses. Sorry, he could regain the opulences that were lost. But then it started with an offense. I was just wanting to underline offense. Then comes Chaitanya Charitamrita, where you have Gopal Chapala. Gopal Chapala practically wanted to belittle Srivas Thakur. So what he did was he practically wanted to show that Srivas Thakur was duplicitous and he was practicing something else. So he put all kinds of paraphernalia, which is specifically paraphernalia which is considered tamasic, like liquor, meat, etc., in front of Srivas Thakur's house, and saying that even though they're claiming they're engaging in Hari Bhajan, they are in fact engaging in Tantra. So they're engaging in activity and they're using tamasic items. Gopal Chapala developed leprosy. This is a classic disease where the limbs and the parts of the body start falling off. Literally, the limbs started falling. So it's a classic disease for offenders as seen in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So he sits on the bank of the Ganga and he tells Mahaprabhu that you are Patita Pavan, you have come to deliver the whole world, but then why are you not delivering me? I am suffering so much. Mahaprabhu says that you will have to suffer for millions and millions and millions of more lifetimes for offending my devotees. Then Gopal Chapala goes and then he begs forgiveness from Srivas Thakur, and then Mahaprabhu forgives him, and then his body is restored. So the solution again is to go back to the devotee who is offended. Inspiration of being a Brahmana, I'm giving mundane examples of Saubhari Muni, Indra, and Brahmana. They all lose everything based on this extraordinarily powerful situation of coming in touch with Vaishnavas, whom Krishna claims as one of his opulences, but then treating them badly. And then comes the situation with Devanand Pandit. Everybody knows Devanand Pandit's ashram. It's a special ashram in Mayapur. And it is actually the sannyas guru of Srila Prabhupada, Keshav Pragya Maharaj. You can go there to his samadhi. If you ask anybody in Mayapur, they will take you to Devanand Gaudiya Math. Devanand Gaudiya Math is where the samadhi of Srila Prabhupada's Guru Maharaj is, Sannyas Guru Maharaj. He gave him sannyas. Now, why is Devanand Pandit Prabhu's name mentioned? Devanand Pandit Prabhu, this was before Mahaprabhu's advent. Devanand Pandit Prabhu was a teacher of Srimad Bhagavatam, nothing less. But his philosophy and his teaching was of a different nature. They were somewhat tinged with impersonal philosophy. And his students were not well trained because the teacher himself was considered at that point in time not well versed with Bhagavatam. He did not understand the purport and the meaning or the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. He was giving Srimad Bhagavatam classes, and one day Srivas Thakur Prabhu, he was basically there in the class. And during Bhagavatam class, Srivas Thakur Prabhu became inspired from within, which means he went into what we would call an ecstasy of prema because he's a pure devotee. He went into an ecstasy of prema and he rolled on the ground, and all the disciples of Devanand Pandit practically insulted Srivas Thakur, threw him out, and Devanand Pandit did nothing to stop that. So even if we participate in a circumstance where a Vaishnav is insulted, and we do nothing, if we stand there and we don't stop things, then we carry that burden. And this was before Mahaprabhu's time. Then Devanand Pandit Prabhu continued speaking Srimad Bhagavatam. One day he was speaking Srimad Bhagavatam. Mahaprabhu was in the neighborhood, and with his followers, he was doing kirtan. He heard Bhagavatam and he became quite angry. He started saying, who is this person? What authority does he have to speak Srimad Bhagavatam? Why is he speaking Srimad Bhagavatam? Because all his conclusions are wrong. He doesn't have any authority. Mahaprabhu became very angry just hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from Devanand Pandit Prabhu. Then Devanand Pandit Prabhu didn't really think much of it. Then Mahaprabhu left Navadvip. He went to Sri Kshetra, Jagannath Puri. And when he was in Jagannath Puri and he was displaying his extraordinary pastimes and the followers were increasing, at that time Devanand Pandit Prabhu developed this inclination and the feeling that, oh my God, I never took association of such a great personality. How did I ignore Mahaprabhu? Then he somehow or the other keeps in his heart this feeling of separation that I haven't really treated Mahaprabhu well. I should have gone and paid my obeisances. How did I not get the association and the opportunity for service? What was I doing? Then one day, Vakreshwar Pandit Prabhu, he is a great associate of Mahaprabhu. He was actually dancing And while he was dancing, and he could dance for 3 days, there used to be multiple Mridanga parties who used to accompany Vakreshwar Pandit because they will get exhausted if he starts dancing and doing kirtan. He could just continue for 3 days, 4 days. And they need to change the Mridanga and the kirtan teams because to keep pace with his dancing. So Devanand Pandit Prabhu saw the dancing of Vakreshwar Pandit. And at that point in time, he practically controlled the crowd. He did not want them to disturb Vakreshwar Pandit Prabhu's dancing. He then went and then fanned Vakreshwar Pandit when he swooned and he fell down in prema, unconscious. He took his head on his lap, fanned him, wiped the sweat, etc. He served the great Vaishnav. Mahaprabhu then returned to Navadvip and he gave mercy to Devanand Pandit. So what is the conclusion? Devanand Pandit ashram in Mayapur is where one should go and chant and beg for mercy from Mahaprabhu if Vaishnava Aparadh has been committed, so that inspiration could begin again. Yeah. So Devanand Pandit is another example of where there was a lot of inspiration, great Pandit, but then he could go nowhere because there was an offense. It was taken away. So inspiration, Krishna helping, remember, Krishna helps to forget. How about Sachi Mata, the great mother of Mahaprabhu? She offended Advaita Acharya Prabhu because she felt that Advaita Acharya Prabhu had kept Mahaprabhu away and he didn't prevent him from going to Jagannath Puri. So there was a mother's affection and she offended Advaita Acharya Prabhu. She didn't treat him properly. Mahaprabhu was furious about this. He practically decided that unless she took the dust of the lotus feet of Advaita Acharya Prabhu, she will not receive prema. This is Mahaprabhu's own mother. He said, you will not receive prema unless you take the dust of Advaita Acharya Prabhu's lotus feet. So one day, Mahaprabhu visits, and then Advaita Acharya Prabhu basically pays obeisances. And while he is paying obeisances, Sachi Mata takes a little dust from the lotus feet of Advaita Acharya Prabhu and then smears it on her body and her head. Then she receives prema. So you go back again, Mahaprabhu was not ready to even accept that unless she took forgiveness from Advaita Acharya Prabhu. She got forgiveness. So then he was very pleased with his mother. He gave forgiveness to her. So the point we are trying to make is what is being given to us has come from the heart of devotees. And Bhakti Devi has come to us because we served and she was inspired to come and give us inspiration. Bhakti Devi leaves our heart as well because of how we interact with each other and how we interact in Sangha and how we interact with the Guru. This is very important. Why am I mentioning the Guru? Can the Guru be offended by a disciple? Of course, yes. Vaishnava Aparadh is the first step. Guru Aparadh is the third step. It is just a matter of time. Can the Guru be offended? Of course. Because we live in a very complex environment. We live in a very complex environment where typically in ISKCON, for instance, the personality who is the spiritual master or who is the Siksha connection, Siksha Guru, is also playing a role in administration. They could be involved in activities which are connected to the institution. They could be involved in activities of money. They could be involved in things which are not quite traditional because of the complexity of the institution and the way it is. There could be involvement. And oftentimes we find that if someone is a spiritual master, they could be poor administrators. They could be a wonderful, elevated Vaishnav who has given us inspiration because Krishna has chosen that particular personality to give us inspiration. But that same personality may be very Brahmanical, where they may not have good administrative skills. What should we do under circumstances? Should we judge the Guru based on their administrative capacity, or should we judge the Guru based on their ability to inspire us? This is a tricky situation. If we make one mistake here, we will lose our inspiration. Shastra says there can be no deliberation when the instructions from the Guru is being received. There can be no deliberation. There should be no thought process. There should be no thought process. One should implement it. Even if logically in our minds, we can't really fit the logical aspects of it. we should not, and we should ensure that we obey the orders. What is this principle? This principle of obeying the orders of the Guru, even if we don't agree with the specific instruction, because from the context of administration, from the context of some minor aspect of how things are done, we may have an alternate idea. But even if that exists, do we follow or do we not follow? We follow. That is the conclusion of Shastra. There should be no deliberation, even if you have an alternate conclusion in mind. If this instruction comes from the Guru, there should be no deliberation whatsoever. Then what happens? Krishna steps in. When Krishna sees that the disciple is following the orders of the Guru, when Krishna sees that the disciple is endeavoring to follow the orders of the Guru, and keeping the principle of inspiration as being foremost, more than the details of a particular circumstance. When the Krishna is seeing that the disciple is able to process the event and he's choosing the most appropriate transcendental relationship and keeping the inspiration distinct from the nitty-gritties of a circumstance, when the disciple is able to see the big picture, even though the disciple is involved in small details, Krishna helps overcome any mistakes and any difficulty that may come due to following an instruction which is, from a practical sense, not very good one. We should understand this, that Krishna is going to intervene. Just because we followed the Guru's order, Krishna will intervene because we are following the principle of inspiration. This is a very, very tricky and very powerful topic. That's why I wanted to bring this up, because oftentimes there are conflicts created in our minds about devotees who have multiple hats to wear. They have multiple roles to play. How do you judge a Vaishnav based on the complexity of the circumstance? We again go back to the principle of inspiration. If someone has inspired us, we don't deliberate, we follow orders. It's simple and straight. Krishna will step in. He will make things easier, simpler for us, because we are following the higher principle. This is how it works. You preserve the inspiration at all costs, even if there is a so-called disturbance, loss, so on and so forth. You preserve the inspiration. This is the call that is required. Yeah, it's a complex circumstance. That is why this is basically required for us to understand how to process the interaction with the Guru. Yeah, it is very important for us to understand that there can be no deliberation whatsoever. Krishna will step in. Krishna will give us inspiration. And we should understand that there can be administrative difficulties. There can be mistakes made by the Guru from an administrative standpoint, because they may not be what we would call perfect administrators. We may be better in administration, but if you make the mistake of not following the orders of the Guru, then we lose inspiration. So the more higher principle that has to be adopted is the fact that we need to protect our inspiration. One should be very careful, because what's been received is very, very, very precious. And we are in an environment which is very complex, and we are constantly exposed to material energy. So we sometimes can come into bewilderment. So we need to process all these complexities very carefully, but constantly coming back to the principle of inspiration, saying, Krishna, I don't care. I need to preserve this connection. I need to preserve this inspiration. I want to follow the Shastric precept of being able to follow the orders of the Guru without deliberation. Yeah. This is very important. Then there is a tripod. There is a support system. There is Siksha Gurus, who are all sadhus, who are practicing Krishna consciousness. There is the Shastra, which is a source of reference. And then there is the Guru. So we will see consistency across the board. This is what is supposed to be seen. And if we are doubtful, then we seek help from someone who is senior, whom we can open our heart and confidence so that we can correct misconceptions and the inspiration can be preserved. Preserving the inspiration is the most important objective of any sadhaka, because our business is to stay in Krishna consciousness forever. We do not want to lose this particular connection. We want to try and understand how to preserve it at all costs. So this is how Krishna helps us forget. Jaya and Vijaya, his doorkeepers, how did they forget? If you read Srimad Bhagavatam, it is found that they offended the Kumaras. Lord Narayan, Vishnu, comes running down. Scripture says he even forgot to wear his shoes because he saw the offense being committed to Vaishnavas. And what is the statement being made by the Lord? Saying, they have forgotten me. They have forgotten me. Yeah. When we offend, we are forgetting Krishna. Krishna helps us forget. The sambandha is lost. The connection is lost. The inspiration is lost. And then everything else becomes so very difficult to do because the impetus and the connection is practically become quite weak. So umpteen number of examples that we could originally take, but I was wanting to touch upon the principle of Guru Tattva from the perspective of the fact that Krishna arranges for everything. It is Krishna's love as seen by Mahaprabhu, which is the mood of Srimati Radharani. That has been passed on to us by sound vibration from one level to another. The inspiration that we receive in our hearts is the sambandha of the Guru. The instructions that we receive from the Guru is also containing sambandha. Yeah? When the Guru is giving beads and he is telling you, you must chant 16 rounds, in that particular act, he is also empowering us to chant 16 rounds. There's Shakti, there's power, which is being given to us to follow regulative principles, to be able to chant Harinam. Yeah? It is coming through disciplic succession. It is coming from Mahaprabhu. It's coming from Srimati Radharani herself. It is coming from Srimati Radharani herself because in Mahaprabhu's heart, he was in the mood of Srimati Radharani. That is being passed on by disciplic succession. So when that is being broken, that is being interfered with, there are all kinds of challenges one faces. So that is the principle that I wanted to touch upon today. I believe we are out of time, Prabhu. Is that the case? Can someone advise me?
Hare Krishna. We have time. If you
So
want to,
yes.
We have time till 12:30.
I just want to, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and then, I mean, if there are
okay,
some...
Okay, 12:30 would be how?
Yeah,
okay, why don't I finish, summarize, and I'll take questions.
Absolutely, yeah. We can ask.
I will take questions as well.
To put questions in the chat box, and in the meantime, as Prabhu concludes, please put your questions, and we can start on the question answers. Thank you, Prabhu.
Sure, Prabhu. So basically, to summarize, we started out with wanting to understand Guru Tattva. We went to 15:15 of Bhagavad-Gita because Bhagavad-Gita is revealing Krishna's heart to us. It is basically the instructions of Krishna given to us so that we have the ability to understand how to approach him. Then we went on to see that in 15:15, Krishna is telling us that he is going to facilitate remembrance, he's going to facilitate forgetfulness. Then we wanted to see how does he help us remember. So we spoke about inspiration. We spoke about two sources of inspiration. One source of inspiration is the sadhu, because Krishna is using someone. The other source of inspiration is Harinam, because it is non-different from Krishna. And then we spoke about the idea of inspiration coming through the parampara system is sound vibrations containing Sambandha Tattva. The relationship with Krishna is being passed on from one heart to another over the years, and it has come into our heart when we come in touch with the parampara. That is inspiration. And then that inspiration gives us the strength and gives us the ability for us to be able to chant and for us to be able to serve. And we spoke of the fact that Krishna has a very special place for his devotees because this is one of his opulences. Out of the 64 opulences, one of the opulences is Prema Madhurya, which is practically the love and the exchanges between him and his devotees. So he's practically saying, my devotees are one of my opulences. I distinguish myself from Lord Narayan because I have all these extraordinary devotees. So that is their position in Krishna's heart. This is what he thinks about devotees. And then we looked at the fact about how the inspiration can break. We looked at the example, which is of a more distant nature, of Saubari Muni, who was very accomplished and fully, absolute accomplished yogi. And he goes on from being underwater and focusing on transcendence to marrying 50 women because he loses focus. And then we looked at the example of the king of heavens, Indra, losing everything because he offends the spiritual master. And then we looked at the example of more recent times of Gopal Chapala during the Chaitanya Charitamrita, his offense to Srivas Thakur. We looked at the story of Devanand Pandit Prabhu and how even if you silently witness an offense, that is enough to stop everything. That is the example given by Devanand Pandit Prabhu. But of course, Devanand Pandit Prabhu rectified, and he is considered to be one of the closest associates of Mahaprabhu. And then we looked at the fact that our own daily practice starts with remembering that the Guru is an eternal associate of Krishna. The Samsara Dava prayers in the morning practically remind us that he is an eternal associate of Krishna and Radharani. We also do the Guru Puja at 7 o'clock again to remind us that we are dependent on the mercy of the Guru, that we are very insignificant, and which is the truth, because nobody is qualified in this movement to receive what has been given. We cannot qualify. Nobody is. We are all Kripa Siddhas. We are dependent on mercy. Mercy is what inspiration is all about. If we are de-inspired, if we lose inspiration in a long haul, it is a simple statement that something has gone very wrong with the way we have dealt with the environment, we have dealt with the mercy, we haven't processed perhaps an event in life. Yeah. Mahaprabhu distinguishes. We should never underestimate Krishna's ability to find out what is right and what is wrong. He is in the heart. So he's not going to make a mistake. Mistakes are not made by Krishna. Nobody leaves this movement. Nobody leaves this movement. Trust me. Nobody can leave this movement. There are very few who can stay. There are very few who can stay because it's a long haul and you need to be inspired, which means you maintain the connection. You constantly understand the big picture, reposition yourself and say that this is more important than what I am thinking of right now. And this is how we process devotees. We process those who have been instructing us. It's very important for us to constantly remind ourselves of who we are, regardless of what we may have accomplished, because scripture is full of examples of people falling apart after accomplishing great things because they have forgotten the foundation. Okay, so I'll stop here and I will take questions, if any, and then to whatever extent I can, I will try and address your questions.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Wonderful class. Very nicely explained the uphill struggle of our sadhana bhakti, and it can be an uphill struggle, as you mentioned. And you've taken examples from all the three scriptures that you mentioned earlier. So very well explained. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. And you linked all the three scriptures for us, so we can learn how important all three scriptures are to us and how much we can learn from each one. I have some questions in the chat box, but I'm going to be greedy and ask you a question myself, first of all. Spiritual master or
Sure.
the Guru, we have give so much emphasis. Krishna gives so much emphasis, and as you mentioned that Gurus are the spiritual master, the eternal servant of Krishna. He is the representative of Krishna, and he carries Bhakti Devi in his heart, which he passes on to his devotees. And then once the jiva is exhausted with his desires, having enjoying his senses, then Krishna arranges for his spiritual master to assist him and give him the transcendental knowledge. Now, that's all very well. That's very nice. But then there are Siksha Gurus and Diksha Gurus who fall down as well. So, I mean, how do we understand it then? We give so much greatness to the spiritual masters, and then we find that they're falling down. And that is always a fear in the heart of the disciple as well, that this spiritual master that I'm inspired by, I hope he doesn't fall down. And then yet they do fall down. So how do we understand this?
See, the first point is fall downs in our movement are simply a circumstance where the devotee who at one point was sincerely serving could not continue their service because of weakness. And the weakness arrived because of offenses, etc., where the weakness itself took over, which is the example given by Saubhari Muni, etc., and they dominated. However, how do we process this particular circumstance? We have to be very careful in processing devotee Vaishnavas who are good practitioners at some point, who inspired a lot of people, but then who fell casualty to material energy because they were not careful and they could not hold on to the inspiration given by Srila Prabhupada, which is the reason why they fell down, is because they could not hold on to the inspiration. Srimad Bhagavatam has this particular sequence in the 3rd canto of how Lord Brahma runs after his own daughter, Mother Saraswati, because he's bewildered by the mode of passion. And because he's bewildered by the mode of passion, he runs after his own daughter, which is like an abominable, unthinkable offense committed by someone of such a high stature in the overall hierarchy. But how did the great sages react to him? This is where our lesson has to come from. The sages at that point in time, if you notice in Srimad Bhagavatam in terms of how they spoke, they practically were talking to Lord Brahma, reminding him of his position and wanting him to come back to his senses by reminding him of his exalted position and reminding him that he is supposed to basically be the maintainer of religious observances, and he is wanting to commit a sin which would be considered to be an abomination which could take him away. So they were not insulting and engaging in gossiping, which is what we find in the modern day. They were engaging in wanting to facilitate the comeback of that particular jiva into the fold so that they could continue their service. So even in our movement, if a person falls down, that possibility exists because of the fact that they are surrounded by material energy, and in weakness, they can fall down. However, if such a person comes back, humbles themselves, and continues chanting Harinam, they are very fortunate. This is practically an instance where Mahaprabhu has insulted them to such a level that they don't have an identity other than being a chanter of Harinam. They come back and quietly find a corner, they do the little service, and they're chanting Harinam. Okay? Those devotees are very fortunate because they have been corrected by the Lord himself, but he has not thrown them away. That is a circumstance where there has been weakness, and the weakness has been corrected, and they have come back. Okay? So our first attitude is that we would want to take on the attitude of not gossiping and not talking about this particular circumstance, but really wanting to offer prayers to Mahaprabhu so that that jiva who at one time inspired many is now weak and he is hurt and he is fallen. So we want him to come back. So this should be the proper approach to anybody who practically has difficulty in furthering the Krishna consciousness. If this happens to one's own spiritual master, that's a very, very unfortunate circumstance. If the guru's behavior is not consistent, now there are two conditions. If the guru's behavior is consistent with Shastra, is consistent with sadhus, other practitioners, then that guru has to be accorded great respect and we should have no deliberation in following instructions. If the guru's behavior is inconsistent with Shastra, inconsistent with steady practitioners, then such a guru can be rejected is the Shastric conclusion as well. But this has to be done very carefully. But again, this has to be done in a manner where we have to understand two things. One, why is it happening to me? Why isn't it happening to person X or person Y? You know, we have to understand that there is a karmic angle to this experience. You know, we can't really push that out of not push the aspect of out of the window that this person inspired us at some point. Now we want Krishna to help that person, and then we also need help. So we seek help from someone else in Prabhupada's family who can assist us. That is why there is a need for sadhus who are Siksha gurus in addition to the Diksha guru who can support the journey of the disciple. So this would be my response.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Very well explained. I'm going to move on to the next question. This is a private question sent. How do we get over the fear of making offenses and that then stopping us from serving or progressing in our spiritual life? How do we get over the fear of making offenses?
This is again a matter of sadhu, shastra, guru. See, the idea is how do we how do we basically overcome the fear? There need be no fear if our behavior is consistent with Shastra. But we have to behave like someone who is passing through a forest and who is carrying a lot of gold. Someone who is carrying a lot of gold has a lot to fear. They're afraid that there could be dacoits, there could be robbers, they could stop us, they could assault us and take away something very precious. So we have been given something very precious. So we want to act as someone who has something very precious. So most of the problems are not with those who think that they have something precious. Most of the problems come from devotees who don't understand that they have been given something precious, and then they practically lash out and act in a manner as if nothing matters. So there should be no fear in general, but there should be enough care where we are afraid of losing what has been given. Yeah? And we should maintain our behavior according to Shastric principles. If we have a situation which involves someone who is senior to us, we should approach someone who is at that level. We should never directly address the devotee who is senior to us. We approach those who are equally, I would say, senior by number of years and so on, or ashram for that matter, and then we open our hearts and we explain that this is a misconception. We always put the blame on ourselves, saying this is a misconception I have. What do you think of the misconception? How should I process this particular circumstance? Can you give me some insight? They would be happy to assist. And that is the role of community, because collective consciousness is the responsibility of leadership in a sangha. Collective consciousness. Individual consciousness is the responsibility of individual practitioners. So if you create an environment which is fearless, where people can approach those, and there's a lot of love and there's an exchange of love, then there is no need for devotees to fear. They can approach. If devotees are generally afraid in the sangha to speak to each other and to speak to seniors, then understand that there are deep-rooted issues. This needs to be addressed at a much deeper level, not in terms of my giving an answer. If it's a broad problem, there's a problem there overall. Yeah. If it is a specific problem to the devotee, then the devotee should have Shastra saying, okay, I'm following all the principles. If I have issues, I'm going to talk to the seniors and I'm going to open my heart, but all the while praying to Krishna that I want to do this in the mood of service. I do not want to do this in the mood of criticism.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Thank you, Rory. We have a question from Nitai Mata Devidasi. Hare Krishna, Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances.
Should I read this, Prabhu? Because I can see it as well. Should I just read it?
Excellent. If you can do that, Prabhu, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it as well, because this way I can just read it. Yeah. Bit worried about why the Lord wants us to forget him. Even if it is not our desire, will that happen? Okay. The idea is that Krishna is not wanting us to forget him. He is trying very hard to help us remember. He is trying very hard. Otherwise, he wouldn't be sending his personal servants and an entourage to constantly come to the planet to inspire us and to make all kinds of wonderful arrangements. Krishna wants us to remember him all the time. There's no doubt. Krishna is more eager for our association than we are for him, to be honest. This is the conclusion of the Acharyas. Yeah, Krishna is more eager for our association than we are for his association, because that is the problem. So we should first of all understand that he is not really working very hard to pick and choose what's in our heart to help us forget. That is not the situation, but we should understand why we have forgotten him, so that we can have a broad plan and a big behavior change, which would allow us to go through many, many years of fruitful sadhana. Second question, sometimes devotees have to move to distant places where there's not much devotee association for personal or work reasons, extremely against their desires. How could we see Lord's hand there? The most important thing about practicing Krishna consciousness is to understand that there is an interplay between karma and the Lord's desires. If we are in an unfortunate situation, it means that our karma is playing out where we are in an unfortunate situation. But we should still accept it as Krishna's arrangement, then it would become Krishna's arrangement. This is Trinadapi Sunichena. Each and every day, waking up and understanding that today has been arranged by you. Krishna, you have arranged today. You've arranged all the complexities, all the problems, the health issues, the economic problems, whatever we have, everything has been arranged by you for me to come closer to you. This is Trinadapi Sunichena, being humble enough to accept the arrangement made by the Lord, and then acting out with courage. That courage is basically to seek association and to constantly pray that we can come back into association. So it doesn't mean we just accept the environment and we do nothing. It means we actively plan to get association and come back. Yeah, we get association and we come back, but all the while also understanding in our mind that this is Krishna's desire. Without his desire, I wouldn't be here. So it's very important to practice Trinadapi Sunichena, Taro Riva Saishnuna, but at the same time have the courage to act upon the environment. At any given time, any devotee, any yatra, any temple, any country in Krishna consciousness has been given exactly what they need for them to move forward. Yeah, we should never ever think that Krishna is holding back because we already have been given what is required. For us to go to the next step, whatever is required has already been provided. So that recognition is Trinadapi Sunichena. Now let us see, there is, okay, I think there were only 2 questions, I believe. So one moment, please. Yeah, there were 2 questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhuji. I mean, sometimes we sort of blame everything on our karma, how we're feeling. We might be feeling fearful all the time, or we might have other issues and we just blame it on our karma and we leave it at that. And then we can also say there's Krishna's arrangements, and when he's happy or when we are purified, things will get better. I mean, is that enough? Or like you said, we have the courage to do something about it. I mean, where do we stop? Where do we draw the line, saying that this is karma and Krishna's arrangements, or that now we have to do something, we have to endeavor to get out of this struggle or this situation that we're in? Where do we draw that line?
Yes, sure. Krishna consciousness is a fine balance between where the practitioner starts thinking that everything is dependent on them, and also knowing that even if you act out thinking everything is dependent on you, which means you do all the practical steps to make things work, Krishna still may not grant the outcome that we are trying to get. So it's a fine balance. So we need to make efforts. We do not want to think that I will sit back and then whatever arrangements can be made, and if it is made, then I act. Because in our movement, we take inspiration from the devotees in Vraja. Mother Yashoda doesn't wait for Krishna. She goes, she grabs him, gives him a bath, she stops him from running, puts clothes on him, feeds him forcibly, ties him up. So there's a lot of activity that goes on by the devotee, as if in the mood that Krishna is dependent on them. So that is what we need to have. We need to have the understanding that Krishna is dependent on us, while also keeping a balance and understanding that we need to put in efforts, but we may not be granted the results because Krishna is not wanting that. We need to be able to accept that as well. So it's a fine balance. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Okay, I think anybody else would like to ask a question or come online? An audio, please. This is the opportunity now. Prabhuji is here. We have his attention. We have his time. And I really appreciate Prabhuji doing that for us today. And so if you'd like to hear or ask anything, please ask now. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next stage of the program. Okay. Prabhuji, would love to hear Narsinga prayer from you, if that's okay.
No, Prabhuji. Sorry. I'm actually, I can't sit for too long. Actually, I'm in a position where I'm not comfortable at this time.
Okay.
I have to decline. I'm so sorry.
No, that's not a problem.
Because I need to go to, yeah.
Okay. And so thank you so much, Prabhuji.
The next time I will oblige.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for having me, and wish all of you the very best for Janmashtami and Radhashtami and Balaram Purnima.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We'll catch up with you very soon. Hare Krishna.
Jai.